Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, the post-spring, early summer, about 3 months away from the season, Red Raider depth chart. And we get into the thick and thin of it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for making us your first listen. And today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. Hope you had a great weekend as we kick off a brand new week and looking ahead to a brand new season. And we'll dive into a conversation today that, Chris, you got to visit with the head coach about, Joey McGuire, and, well, him trying to find the right people for his team faster and, well, not so much for free anymore, I suppose, in the era of name, image, and likeness. But want to dive into a lay of the landscape as the dust is settled from spring. We're about to hit the summer break of sorts. And as we near the end of May, boom, I mean, only about 60 days away from fall camp when these things will really, truly be sorted out. But wanted to have a de facto depth chart conversation here today. We'll touch on some of the spots of most interest to us. We'll get into some of the thick and thin areas where you're really going to be looking for some help to show up. And then maybe where you feel like, hey, you're as deep as you've been in a long time, or in some senses, maybe ever, at least in our era of watching or covering Texas Tech football. But I know there are some, obviously, opportunities to use the term cement today. So we will get back to maybe cement and concrete analogies, but always excited to hear from the head coach on, a little more clarity, I guess, to the picture as you head into a season again with some high expectations and at a point in Joey McGuire's tenure where you really expect to hit the ground running and some wheels to begin turning, as now some of his guys and his staff's guys begin to really have an opportunity to impact the season.
Yeah, and we've had back and forth going over the last, couple of weeks about this and just and the depth chart is an interesting conversation because so we just need to put this conversation in proper context as it relates to us getting into a depth chart. And some people, they look at a 2 deep and it's the holy grail. It's like it's like the top 25 preseason ranking that really in some ways is meaningless, but yet we look at it, we talk about it, we acknowledge it. Depth chart is very similar. It's all in the eyes of the beholder. It is, hey man, can I get my hands on a 2 deep? I mean, I just I need a 2 deep. You get that little tick going like Pookie, in New Jack City. Yeah. I'm going way back there. But I think that as long as you understand what it is fun to talk about. But too many people just like, well, he's not listed here. Why is he on the field? Well, you just have to understand how some of this stuff works. So, okay. So as far as your, and let's be honest, two, just another one, the coaching staff, whether it's post-spring, game week, mid-fall camp, whatever, there have been times, because I've known coaches that have done this very thing, because they've told me specifically, hey, man, we're just trying to get his attention. They use these depth charts as like a hello to some of their own players.
Yeah, because we're not the only ones that are looking over these things.
Oh, yeah. They want to motivate some guys. They want to, it's a tool from that sense. But I don't think Joey really operates that way. He's just very transparent. But I mean, Mike did this at times. Tuberville did this at times. Cliff admittedly did it at times. to where there was and then you can do this too. You could put an or next to some positions so you don't ruffle any feathers in this day and age of transfer portal and NIL era, right?
Yes.
Like, hey, let's make sure that he hadn't played great, but let's make sure we don't piss him off because we don't want him to leave. Now, granted, you're kind of locked in with your roster now. Guys can't get into the portal until after next season is over with, or the regular season anyways. But anyway, so
yeah, it's like that reminds me of like junior high or high school for some in a big enough class where you're like telling mom or dad you get home, hey, I'm first string, I'm second string, I made the team. Now it's like, Mom, I'm an or, Dad. I'm in the mix, right? I guess is what that means. And some of these motivational tactics I remember extending to an extreme extent, even like beyond the depth chart, to like the nameplate on the jersey, going back to the Mike Leach era. So there's a variety of ways, I guess, to motivate, right?
Whatever it takes. I think coaches are trying to find that button to push, and sometimes you miss with that thought, or you're like, man, I probably shouldn't have done that, or man, I should have pushed a different button, or I should have pushed it harder or repeatedly, Right. Okay, so yeah, you get a post-spring depth chart. I think Joey is very transparent and conscious with what he has, what he lets out there. I think one of the first things when you kind of look at it and see it is that a guy that we've talked a lot about, a bit of a surprise if you ask us before spring versus post-spring.
First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and it does it all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within only 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply.
I think one of the first things when you kind of look at it and see it is that a guy that we've talked a lot about, a bit of a surprise if you ask us before spring versus post-spring, we would not have had this individual involved in any capacity in the starting lineup, but here he sits as Sheridan Wilson at starting center or first-team center. And I think that's one of the biggest things and developments that has come from the spring. And it honestly is a good thing. He has kind of come out of, I don't want to say nowhere, but he's pushed through. He's earned it. I mean, I listened to Clay McGuire and Joey and Zach and everybody talk about him. It was consistent. It kind of caused them to kind of go, okay, well, let's move some pieces around. I guess Caleb won't be taking a ton of reps at center. So what it has done, though, is at this point, Davion Carter, which kind of surprises me, is your backup interior guy. Again, we know he can play any of the 3 interior spots, mainly center and right guard. Vinny Scurry has only played left guard, but that gives you – but I can't imagine that Davion Carter came here as a senior to not play, but that's kind of where you're at. So that's a big development. I think the other note to make sure that people understand, when you see depth charts, you have to understand too that really quarterback and offensive line those are the positions where there's just not many others that are going to play at those spots. Ideally, everybody else on the team is going to be in what we would term a rotation. And so, I mean, I don't know if Taj Brooks technically started every game last year. i.e., was he the first running back out there on the first play that they ran on offense? I don't know. But was he the starting running back? Yeah. Defensively, you're going to get 20-ish, maybe sometimes 18, maybe sometimes 22 different names that are playing on a Saturday. So it doesn't really matter like starter or whatever, as long as you're healthy and available and part of a rotation. So defensively, I just don't get caught up into it as much. And yeah, Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts, they may play more snaps than John Curry and Bryce Ramirez at interior linebacker. Okay, maybe it's a 70-30 split. Maybe it's 80-20. Maybe it's 60-40. I don't know. But the starters are going to get more of the snaps. But generally speaking, everybody is playing, and same on offense. You're going to get some Cameron Valdez and some Cam Dickey behind Taj Brooks, okay? You're going to get a rotation of receivers and all that. But it's offensive line and quarterback that really – you kind of hammer down on it. But the other point that I think Joey would wish that people would really grasp and understand is that you've got two guys on offense that it's really hard to pin down and put them on a depth chart. Because I think that, as he put it, Josh Kelly and Micah Hudson, they will play everywhere. They will be inside receiver. They will be outside receiver. You can hand them the football at times on a jet sweep or whatever. Let your imagination go there. It's hard to put them as a first team this or second team that or whatever. It's just, but they belong on there somewhere, right? I mean, So I think they are going to be versatile. They will look to involve them in a variety of different places, and it's kind of the cat and mouse. The Zach Kittley, I think Josh Kelly is your most polished player on your football team, period. And until Micah Hudson gets healthy and kind of gets to that point, but this is kind of a 1 and 1A on kind of how do you want to utilize this kind of player. But it's up to Zach Kittley. Let's put this kid in motion some. Let's line him up here. Let's line him up there. Let's put him in the backfield and motion him out. You're trying to create a mismatch with these individuals to get them paired up on a safety or a linebacker, somebody that can't cover them. And so it's you get into the lab a bit and you try to utilize that with those two. But that's clearly a point that he would hope that everybody understands with those two individuals, regardless of where you see them listed as a first team this or second team that. So wanted to make sure we got that point across.
Man, and when you scan, and these are names on a piece of paper, so just call me guilty, I guess, for being a fan that's trying to run wild with some hope, excitement, and expectations. But when you scan this group of pass catchers, and thinking about last year, how non-explosive or unexplosive, if that's a word, you were at that spot, Chris, when you're thinking about Josh Kelly or Micah Hudson, Dre McCray, Caleb Douglas, I'm fairly certain you're going to have speed. I hope it's not speed in the form of hot hands from Little Giants, because you're going to need the hands too. A lot of guys can run really, really fast. They're not good football players. They're track stars or whatever. It takes a little bit more than just being able to run fast, obviously, to do these things. And I don't want to leave out the cowboy in Coy Aiken, but I'm playing into a little bit of a stereotype there. Not going to put the guy that's wearing Wranglers necessarily at the top of the speed list, but I don't know. You get him in a crowd, get that sword and stick in his hand. Maybe you're going to see some lateral speed, side-to-side quickness. Either way, I feel like you have gone out and done the best you can, or the best that we as fans could have hoped for, in really trying to bring some more explosiveness to the mix. I know that Dre McCray is a guy that's gotten a lot more rub as far as the conversation from a returner standpoint, but should I say it's going to be something like night and day as far as your ability to get down the field? Again, can you make the play? Can you be where you're supposed to? Can you find chemistry with your quarterback? All those things will be yet to be determined, obviously, as we get into fall camp and into the season. But if you set out on a mission from last year to say, we got to be more explosive in this department, I think as far as the shopping list and the guys that you brought in, you did about the best that you could have hoped for. Am I going too far? Or, again, I know we're sitting here in May, so it's hard to know yet, but I'm just looking at this list and thinking how differently it could be from a season ago.
And we got you, Mrs. Brown, Jordan Brown as well.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Of
And
course.
you've got the TJ West, Kelby Volson, like the younger, group too. That is the up and comer. But look, I think the difference between some of these conversations and what you're saying now is that, like, a guy like Josh Kelly is a proven commodity at the Power 5 level.
Yeah.
Proven. I mean, I heard keep in mind now, breaking news, you got 16 teams in your league. I heard a conversation the other day as they were talking about the top 5 wideouts in the league this coming year. And Arizona clearly has the top one. But Josh Kelly is in that conversation. Multiple folks that were having it both included him. And I just think that's what 1,000 yards and then, the 8 touchdowns. I mean, it's just under 1,000. So it's like 960 or something. Yeah. But that's, as Billy the Kid said in Young Guns 2, heavy steps, Patsy. That's that's heavy steps. I mean, that is, we acknowledge that season. That is legit. He did it in the Pac-12. And I think that with what we have seen in the spring, he's just a very polished route runner. He checks every box. I think he's got a chance absolutely to play at the next level. So, and I think that, I had him described to me as like, he's just an older version of Micah Hudson. I'm like, wow, because we all know the way Micah was talked about and is this ball skills freak and route runner and just high pointing the ball and all these things. But they were like, but he's just a bit more polished. So, we'll just kind of see how this plays out, but it's heavy praise.
Yes.
And it's not just praise coming from internally or us. It's just like external. And that's why I took it, I took it seriously.
And I would say, going back to Coy Aiken, the last time that you had a red-headed pass catcher was one of the best in the modern era of Texas Tech football, the great Joel Filani, of a different variety, sort of, but
baby Moose.
That's right. Also a red-headed pass catcher. So can Coy Aiken supplant Joel Filani as the greatest set of red-handed hands that Texas Tech has ever seen at that position? Only time will tell. As for the offensive line, I have no idea what to expect. No idea. The Red Raider in me, the lifelong Red Raider in me, takes this approach to most things. Expect nothing and be pleasantly surprised if you get more than that. But, Chris, we've got a guy we haven't seen much of at the right tackle spot in Ty Buchanan. We've got newcomers on the inside. We've got a guy who's one of the great stories of coming out of, I don't want to say nowhere, but coming out of the shadows, in Sheridan Wilson. We've got Caleb Rogers, who's bounced around all over the offensive line. And it's not because he was great at the positions he's bounced around from. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And then you got a newcomer at the left tackle spot, backed up by possibly as raw of an addition to the roster as we had. As far as the newcomer there, Rodriguez, who is 6'7" and built like a brick house, but very, very raw. And as you mentioned before, trying to get the JUCO out of him as far as what he is physically and with some of that skill. So and you got a new offensive line coach to add to the mix. So there's really no reason to have any expectation of what we're going to see here, because we've never seen this group together. And the guys that we have seen before may be in a new spot. So hoping for good things, obviously, but you're going to have to get into the season, I think, before you can really form any type of expectation as to what that group is going to be. And then, of course, we're always knocking on wood and hoping for good luck as far as some health is concerned to sustain them as the same 5 guys in the same 5 places from week to week to week, to also help establish some of that chemistry. And I just have to bring that up because as we're talking about, pass catchers and explosiveness and all these fun things, none of it works if you don't have those 5 big men up front working well together. So that'll continue to be, I think, headline number 1 heading into the season. And be interested to see how it breaks down as you get through fall camp, if some of this depth is reshifted or reorganized, or maybe who could emerge as you get closer to the year. But it's as close to about a clean slate as you could get, really, without Buchanan, I guess, and obviously a big dose of Caleb Rogers we've seen plenty before. I mean, it's almost like a totally new set of guys.
Yeah, it's still my biggest concern on your team, or question mark. And I say that, and I still have an exclamation mark, question mark right next to Barron's shoulder. So I don't want, but position group wise, I do.
Yeah.
I think there's still, you're like, and I'll tell you what, I don't know if this is solidified at all. And I have a feeling it's not. It's still very much a work in progress. So there's a couple of things here, and all can be true, and all can kind of give you reason for optimism, but also you talk yourself into kind of the more concern and worry and doubt.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and it's do or die time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, player props, money lines, and a whole lot more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
They have plenty of options here. There really is experience. There is depth. They're not in trouble. If they lose one guy, it's not going to just make the whole thing fall apart. Like kind of what we've seen in years past, where it's like, oh, we just can't ably replace this individual. There is young talent behind these guys. And all that. So that's the positive. I think your numbers, you've gotten them to where you wanted to get them. I mean, Jacob Ponton, Caden Carr, Daniel Sill, Seth Martin. I mean, I may have mentioned one that's not even here anymore. Caleb Rodkey. It just goes on and on. There's a whole bunch of younger players that are in the oven, and you are trying to just leave them in the oven a bit longer. And so then there's this gap where now you've got these older guys, these experienced guys that came in here, and Porcher and Scurry and Martin. Rodriguez not necessarily in that category. But what does it tell you? What does it tell you when Jackson Hughes is added a week ago from South Carolina? And you kind of get the sense that he may be able to come in and help right away. That gives me pause.
Sure.
Because I say, well, that's great that you found somebody that could come in and play right away at one of the tackle spots. However, are we in that much trouble that he could come in and play right away? So it depends on, like, it's kind of like you got, thumb up, thumb down, thumb sideways, not real sure what to do with my thumbs. I mean, so that's why I say this. I'm like, well, this is, again, great that you found this kid, great that you landed him. But if he can come in and push right away, I sure wish I had a couple of tackles that were locked in. Mm-hmm. Like, ain't no chance Jackson Hughes can come in and supplant one of these guys, but that's not where you're at. So that's why I kind of, have questions about this group. And again, while experienced, not experienced here and not experienced here together.
Yep.
There's a difference, and the chemistry part and all that. And like Jackson Hughes he's going to just have to catch up over the summer months and all those things. So yeah, man, that's a bit of a question mark for me.
Before we get out of here, let's get to some of the thick and the thin as far as spots where maybe you feel like you've got a good amount of depth or spots where it could be a little bit thinner. And I want to start with the spot that you described to me in one way or another as possibly the deepest it's been. And that is our group of tight ends. Now, the ability to utilize them obviously is going to be the next step, but you have, like we've talked about with some other spots, you've gone out and I think done as good of a job as you can of trying to collect the type of bodies, the type of players, the type of explosive impact guys that you possibly could. And so I'm really excited to see if they can find a way to utilize these guys. But you've got options.
Yeah, on paper, this group is seriously salty, man. And like you look at, I think I saw this last week. There was somebody ranking position groups and things like that, and I think this tight end group was like 6th or 7th in the country, according to one outlet. And that's again heavy steps, Patsy. That's big time. Now, John Carlos Miller makes this group though, and what I mean by that is, if you just add Jalen Conyers and put him next to Mason Tharp, we're not having this same conversation because that's essentially, to me, Mason Tharp and Baylor Cupp. But John Carlos Miller's upside and potential and what we saw with his playmaking, arrow pointed straight up, that's where it changes the whole outlook of the group in general. Yeah. But then you get into Jason Llewellyn, who is this was one of the most highly recruited tight ends out of high school, out of Aledo, went to Oklahoma, and it didn't work, needed to change his scenery. But as far as what he is as a prospect, it was big time. And he's kind of like your fourth string. And then you add a guy like Trey Jackson, who needs to, probably add, 25 to 35 pounds over time, but freakish athleticism, like 6'6" frame, jumps, can high point it. We saw him at various times in the spring. And, there's some clips out there of him at South Oak Cliff where he was doing some of the same things there. So anyway, there's a lot of options there. You're not beholden to if somebody goes down with injury or whatever. You've got a lot of options in depth. You can flex these guys out. You've got blockers involved, and Conyers has got a worlds of experience too, just kind of like Josh Kelly was in the previous conversation. So, yeah, you're probably that, and maybe I'd probably say that and interior linebacker and maybe running back because of who your starter is probably the positions I feel the best about. As far as proven, that kind of thing.
I got to tell you, on the other side of the football, it's a trust but verify situation because one of these guys was impacted by injury a season ago. But I'm kind of excited about the guys on the edge of that defensive line because you had some young guys that had to get opportunity last year, like say a guy like Dylan Spencer, but also having Isaac Smith back in the mix. You've got a Dedere on the other side of that. And again, just fingers crossed that guys can stay healthy again. But by virtue of the fact of what you had to do last year because of some injury, like with some other spots on your team, I'm hoping you were able to cultivate some depth with some of those young guys that were kind of thrown into the fire maybe a little bit quicker and a little more often than they would have been otherwise. And this would be the time for some of that to pay off. So I'm excited to see maybe what some of those guys can do. And I know that going into last year, Isaac Smith was one of the guys we were most excited about before he got derailed by injury entirely.
Yeah, it was his birthday over the weekend too. So happy birthday, Isaac!
Feliz cumpleaños.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We've been on that bandwagon a long time.
Yes,
and I'm not getting off. I think there's a lot of names there. There's a lot of possibilities. You mentioned Joe Adedire, who missed the spring. Isaac Smith missed the spring. Dylan Spencer missed a lot of the spring. So you didn't get to see a lot of these guys in action. But Charles Esters is just kind of steady as he goes. And there's some possibilities there for sure. And I think there needs to be, but like Isaac has got as much upside as anybody on this football team. And Dylan Spencer was probably as highly recruited as anybody on this football team outside of like a Micah Hudson type. So the potential is there for some of these, and they just now need to, and I'll belabor the point again, it doesn't matter who starts or where they're listed on the depth chart. All will play. All will get their turn to come off the edge and go after the quarterback and wreak havoc and all those things. You just forget Isaac Smith's, it's 2 years ago now. He just played like it was the red shirt year where I can play the 3 or 4 games and not get dinged. And that was a 3 or 4 game stretch where it was like, who is this dude? That's what a lot of people were asking. Like, where'd he come from? Why has he not been playing all year? Similar to Amir Washington, kind of out of the bowl game last year. Like, we've had this guy stashed all year. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you had, and he'd moved around in some position switches and all those things. But it's the talent and the youth that you keep reading about on signing days is starting to creep into the these depth charts and these conversations, and you're just almost there. It's just a matter of now getting to that point of the almost there and then holding on to them all. And maybe almost there is by September, by October. I mean, you're going to hear from a lot of these folks as the season rolls on. And that's the other thing that Joey would say, too, about this depth chart in general. I think they have felt too vulnerable in some spots over the first couple of years here to where you just didn't have the depth that you wanted to. Every coach wants to be deep. Every coach wants to be experienced and talented, and you want to have 11 guys on the first team, all Big 12 team. Okay, not possible. But you are. I think they are tired of the season being derailed because this guy is out or that guy is falters or whatever, and you're trying to create as many options for yourself and cross-train guys and all that, even over the top. And I think you using the walk-on portion of your program to the fullest extent that you can to make sure that you've got able, experience, talent, whatever that's we're developing that's in place just in case somebody goes down. And so the overall depth here is what is most impressive. The knock is going to be there's not a lot of first team all Big 12 types, right? There's not a lot of guys that are going to be clear cut nods other than, in my opinion, and we talk about this, Taj Brooks and like a Dre McCray, is a kick returner. I mean, there's just not a lot of no-brainer types as far as like all-conference types. However, the depth is pretty darn salty.
Man, can't wait to see it come to fruition. Fall camp just around the corner when we'll have a chance to see this updated, possibly revised, and then on to popping. You know what it is whenever September arrives, and you actually got to prove as to why you are on this list and in some of the capacities that we've discussed here today. Good stuff as always, Chris. Appreciate the time and insight, and we'll see you for the next one.
It's a new week, people. Let's wrap up May. Let's be solid here. So no quitting, man. So let's see the finish line. May's almost over. One more week-ish to go. So let's be strong.
For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for being out there. As always, hope you get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And the best way to help us grow the show, comment anything below. Get in there and mix it up in the YouTube comments this week. Appreciate you and hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.